because we've only got you for 1 hour, April, I think it's time that we actually
Hmm.
cracked on. And first of
Yeah,
all, I just wanted to say thank you so much for being an incredible ambassador for us. And I know this is all about you today, but I wanted to also thank Adam Deacon for being an incredible bipolar ambassador for us. You both
absolutely.
single handedly are smashing it, along with our other ambassadors, of course. It's incredible to have you in the space. Now, just to outline the etiquette, these spaces, whilst they may be billed as being in beta, Twitter have keenly rolled them out. And I reckon that's because Clubhouse was stealing a march on them. Clubhouse was leading this. Adam has access or has accessed Clubhouse in the past. He'll know how interactive a forum it is. He'll know how can I put it, addictive it can be to actually be on the forum, because it's a way of actually interacting with people that you've never interacted before, but also sharing your news, views, and opinion on multiple matters. But today we're talking about eradicating stigma. But before I leave and talking about Twitter Spaces, just to point out that even though they build this as being um, live and fit for purpose, it is rather buggy. So if this does actually crash, if you're following us already, and that is Bipolar UK, you will know that you can actually jump back on the space by, well, obviously it will be tweeted out in our timeline, but also there's a purple haze. If you're on mobile phone, there's a purple haze around our logo. So as time is marching on, just to quickly outline the etiquette. Now, our wonderful guest, April Kelley, has taken an hour out of her time to be with us today. And whilst I feel that it doesn't need to be said, I need to tell you this anyway. The etiquette is as you would if you had met April in person, i.e., those same rules apply. So I'd like maximum respect and maximum love and maximum appreciation. One way in which you can show your appreciation, if this is your first time to Spaces, just acquaint yourselves with the buttons along the um, bottom of the screen. Now, if you're actually using either an Android or an iPhone, the buttons you need to acquaint yourself with are the two people sitting or standing side by side. That will let you know who the speakers are and how many people in the room. But the more important way of actually interacting is next to that, there is a heart plus. Now, that will enable you to actually, in an interactive way, show your appreciation. You can laugh, you can wave, you can show the peace sign, you can show the fist sign, or you can show the 100. Any of those will let us know A, you're still listening, B, there's a point that resonates with you, or C, if you use any of those emojis, that will let us know that you want to speak as well. But the common way in which you indicate you want to speak or let us know you want to speak is the mic on the far left of the screen on the bottom hand side. Okay, just so that we can have a quick test before we actually roll this out and before we get things underway, can we have everybody pressing your emoji if you are on a Apple or Android device, just so that we are all acquainted with where those buttons are? Now, if you can press those emojis like I'm doing, yes. And more people are doing it, yes. You found your emoji. Come on, Adam. Yeah, that's it.
Hey, like a
My G.
Mexican emoji wave.
Okay, now one final plea just before we get things started. If you could tweet out to your followers, how you do that is the up arrow which says share tweet or share tweet even. It's just below invite via DM. If you share this tweet by clicking that, that will enable more people to actually interact with April in this space. So, you know what? Before I bore you all to death because it's not about Bipolar UK. This is really about April Kelley. I think that we need to give her her proper introduction. April Kelley was born on the 30th of September in 1990 in Hertford, Hertfordshire, if IMDb is to be believed. She was born April Elizabeth Kelley, and she is a producer and actress known for Annie Waits, 2017, amazing production there, and Treacle, That's where we kind of like came in because that's what piqued my interest alongside the article which Happy People put out around, actually, it was soon after that time, but also Rose as well, a 2020 film. But I would love everybody to show their appreciation and welcome April Kelley, who'll be talking to me about eradicating stigma. Let's see those emojis, please. Let's all welcome April Kelley.
Hello, everyone. Also, Michael just exposed my age, so I'm going to cut this whole conversation short. Take care, everybody.
Okay, well, I did say it was going to be an interactive session. Essentially, I'm going to be starting things off with a few questions. And for those who want to actually ask questions alongside the questions which I'm going to be asking, by all means, do click on the mic. So, without further ado, I'm going to start off with a basic question, and that is, this session is about eradicating stigma. You know, April, I'm curious, what does stigma look like?
What does stigma look like? Well, I can only speak on behalf of myself, but I mean, I'm sure everyone listening will be able to relate to the universal stigma that is out there. I think it's largely ignorance. I think it's wrong use of language. And subsequently, it ends in erasure, regardless of if it's mental illness or sexuality. It's a fight to not feel invisible.
I hear you there. I suppose just a following question from that, you know, what you said there intrigued me. In terms of perpetuating stigma, fueling stigma, giving it energy and air, what do you think are the most prevalent things that do that?
I think our media has a lot to answer for. I think we have also a lot of positive reasons to thank media, and I'm sure I will bring up what I always bring up as a broken record player, modern love. But I think growing up, when you see things on the news, as well as how especially sexuality is depicted on screen, we have come a long way. But in the early days, the first amount of stigma on the media was just to not show sexuality unless it was heterosexual, or if you were going to include it, it'd be this massively flamboyant gay icon. And so by the fact that you couldn't see yourself on screen meant that there was this automatic stigma. And likewise with mental illness, and I've said this before, we're nowhere near the right kind of representation on our screens, and it hasn't been helped by the fuel of these true crime documentaries. So if, like every other person out there, that's all I watched initially in lockdown 1, and I thought, this isn't healthy, let's get Schitt's Creek on instead. But with these true crime documentaries, whether it's Ted Bundy, Evil Genius, or the Cecil Hotel, when you're at trial, the final word that gets said is that that person's mentally ill, typically with bipolar. So that's how we're represented on our screens, which is horrible. So that is like the basis of what Joe Blogs understands. I went off on a tangent, Michael. Oh, he's muted himself. I'll carry on talking then. I remember watching.
Essentially, you're still on track. I mean, if you think about it, you're still talking about stigma and what causes it, and you're giving some really good traits and characteristics of where they come from. You're definitely still on track.
Yeah, and I really, the tipping point for me was watching Cecil Hotel, and I don't know who's seen that or who whip up any emojis, but they dressed it up as this true crime documentary about this girl that goes missing. And fundamentally, it should have been a mental illness documentary. They ilked it out, they milked it, they completely milked it. And what it really was at the end was this tragic story about with someone really struggling with their mental health. And it, if I could swear, it really off me. And likewise with sexuality, the stigma, I held so much stigma to myself because I couldn't see myself. So the first time I saw bisexuality on my screen was Inappropriate Behaviour, Desiree Akhavan's film. If I don't know if anyone has seen that there, it's a brilliant independent film of a truly bisexual person. Don't get me wrong, I watched The OC growing up with Alex and Marissa, and possibly the reason why I realised I was bisexual, along with Miss Congeniality. But I only saw it as a segue. I either saw it as a segue into lesbianism or a phase. So as a result, I had more sleepless nights wondering if I was gay or straight. So I think initially, when you are struggling with your mental health and when you're confused about your sexuality, it's kind of human nature to seek yourself out on the screen. And I just never saw myself. And I think that was detrimental to my journey with both my mental health and sexuality.
You know, I'm glad you're touching on some of the, albeit uncomfortable, traits of those people who perpetuate myths, because it leads me on to my my next question, and that is the top 5 things of, you know, the traits of things we don't like to see, and, you know, specifically things not to say to somebody, you know, who, you know, I suppose is struggling with not only their sexuality but the stigma of mental health. I mean, what would you say are the top 5 things not to say?
So I was thinking about this, and it's kind of changed with me with the sexuality. I think with bipolar, the two which both really annoy me, and yet I know it comes from such a kind place in someone's heart, but it does show how, you know, potentially uneducated they are. But when someone tells me it's normal to feel like that, and say, I'm sure many people feel like that, that is infuriating, despite knowing they mean it to bring comfort. I always just think, and I had this when I was younger and I hadn't been diagnosed. So at the age of 18, whilst I was pushed out of the closet and also not well, hadn't not been well since I was 15. Bless my parents. They are the most incredible parents anyone could ask for, and they've not done anything wrong through both of these journeys. But they, back in the day, because I was a teenager, they said, you know, everyone has a bad day. And I was thinking, well, blow me. If this is what a bad day feels like for everyone, then I feel collectively sorry for the entire population. So I just thought this was like normal. It was normal to have suicidal thoughts. It was normal to have voices in your head. Oh, that's fine. I'll grow out of it. Nah, yet to grow out of it. I mean, any day now, fingers crossed. So that was tough. And then with sexuality, I've kind of changed my opinion on this, because I was working on a production for a couple of months and met so many new people. And I will come on to this about eradicating stigma, but they all found out because I told them. And everyone went, oh, so have you had more relationship with a guy or girl? Or like, do you have a preference? And questions which would usually get my back up. But I did think at this point, I thought, no, again, this is just sincerity, slightly uneducated, but you're showing an interest, and you're showing, and by asking these questions, I now feel strong enough to not only reply, but also educate a little bit more and tell them that that's not how it works. But that's okay, because I'm here with you now and I'm going to talk it through with you.
I think that's a nice pause in which to kind of like reset the room and to let people know that we're talking about eradicating stigma. It's Pride Month, all month, and sexuality and mental health is the topic of discussion today with April Kelley. And one of the things we're keen to do is not to talk at you, we want to talk with you. So if there's anybody who actually wants to join the discussion, if there's anybody who wants to give their perspective on eradicating stigma, do request the mic, because like I say, we want this to be as interactive a session as possible. But diving into a third question, whilst people in the audience collect their questions before they actually ask for the mic. I'm intrigued. I would like to think of organizations like Bipolar UK as an ally. I would like to think of us as a standard bearer where it comes to, um, I suppose, reaching out and linking up to people like yourself who feels it, knows it, I suppose is the old adage. But just on allyship, what are the traits of an ally? Because, okay, I'm sat here today saying I would like to think of us as an ally, and I'm not asking for brownie points here. I'm merely asking what are the traits of an ally?
So I hate to break it to you, Michael. If you're a charity, that makes you an automatic ally. So you're straight there. Yeah. You're going straight to the top. Okay. That's all right. Because as a charity, I mean, you wouldn't be a working soul if you didn't educate yourselves on the topic of the charity. But in terms of other traits, I think it is very similar across the board. If I was to be vague initially, it's as simple as listen, and then ask constructive questions, and then be willing to educate yourself. And I keep going back to media because I'm an only child. So film and TV kind of brought me up. They were my big brother and sister. So, and the way that obviously I now work in film and TV, so that's my easiest way to communicate. That said, in my real confusion, and this is how I came across Bipolar UK when I was a bit younger, was I Googled it. I just Googled it, and I didn't Google medical stuff. I didn't want to see statistics. I didn't want to diagnose myself on the internet. Likewise, I didn't put well, actually, that's I've just lied to you all. I did Google sexuality, and for a long time I thought I was sapiosexual. I am not. I'm definitely bisexual, but I shouldn't have done that. I didn't do it with bipolar though. And actually, what I did with both topics is just Googled other people's stories, just so I didn't feel so alone.
Sorry, April, to jump in there, just to pause the proceedings. I'm going to put my hand up and say I don't understand the phraseology you just used there in terms of sexuality. You said, did you say sophio-sexual?
Sapiosexual.
Right, okay.
Yes. So sapiosexual is finding the intelligence sexually attractive or arousing. So it's a real tough thing. So it's a fine line. And I would argue that we all fall in love with the intelligence of what's going on in someone's brain as well. But there is a specific sexuality called sapiosexual. And for whatever reason, growing up at the age of 24, 25, I deemed myself not that. And I identified more as a bisexual woman.
I'm with you.
Yeah. So where was I? What was I talking about? What was I rambling about?
You were talking about traits of an ally. Like I said, I would like to think that there are allies in the room, and perhaps there are allies basically looking to either bolster what they're doing, to enhance what they're doing, to be a better ally. I know that, as a charity, we could do things better, and hence the reason why I said at the top of the question, look, what does allyship look like? What are the traits of an ally?
I'll tell you what, I'll base it on an experience I had very recently. Again, I've been working on this new project and I didn't know anyone else on it, which is quite rare. So I was exposed to about 40 new people, and if anyone is bipolar in the room, you know how arousing that could be, how very triggering into hypomania. And that I did go, guys. I went straight into hypomania, had a brilliant time, and then crashed horribly. But my point is, I met this one person and we just connected immediately. There was no small talk. It was bam, you are now my best friend, deal with it. And I remember had gone round hers, And it came up in conversation. I said, oh, well, yeah, actually, I'm living with bipolar. And she stopped and she faced me and she just said, can you tell me about it? I want to learn. I want to know how I can support you. I want to know what I shouldn't do so I don't trigger you. And that is the first, that's not the first time, but in terms of meeting a new person who has no real idea about bipolar, to turn, look me in the eye and say, I'm here and I want to learn. I think that, especially mental illness, it's too complex and scary for a lot of people. And they also treat us as though we're fragile. So what this person did was faced it head on. And that meant more to me than anyone that kind of went, oh, okay, well, are you well? Like, yeah.
Okay. So, you know, how can an ally then really support? Give us some ways in which, you know, we can all talk about being an ally, but give us some tangible things that we can actually do.
So everyone be like my friend. That would be great. That would be really good. So potentially thinking about how I've been an ally, it's really listening. So, you know, I have a dear friend who has just taken testosterone. He is an incredible man and I love him with all my heart. And he simply messaged his dear friends and said, you can now call me, his name. And he said, so, you know, however you want to do that or change that, that would be great. So immediately I went into my phone book, changed his name, screenshotted it and went, hello. And I think that's a big thing. For me personally, it's different between listening and hearing, and I can see it on people's faces. And I don't know how to explain that, but that's something that I really hope that I can, when someone's telling me something, that they can see me hearing it. In terms of other allies, other traits or other ways to do it, celebrate this month. It's a great month. And usually before the pandemic, we'd be throwing party after party. Now, I'm not talking about the big organizations and corporates who changed everything into a rainbow. They're doing that for money. But like you, me, us here, just show that you're celebrating it. And likewise, Michael, you know how I feel about this. You know how I feel about there being these days of raising awareness. And then people really jump on the bandwagon, but they only do that for one day. And for the rest of the year, they just kind of let it fall by the wayside. And I sometimes say, not Pride Month. Pride Month, again, I will say it again, is a month-long celebration. But for example, World Bipolar Day, as I always team up with you guys, there's this massive element of actually, especially this year, I was quite scared to go on social media because through what people are doing to raise awareness is to be posting these statistics, and statistics within bipolar disorder are very scary. So to come online and see that, you know, someone like myself is 20 times more likely to take their own life, it's very triggering. So as an ally, I urge you not to go online, look at statistics and decide that posting one of those is you doing your bit. Funny enough, what my mum and my friends did this year, I got a load of messages just saying happy World Bipolar Day. And that is someone or people who have lived with me through the last 2-3 years of being diagnosed, who have been there for the good, the bad and the ugly. And instead of treating me like this fragile person, which we can all be on occasion, they're like, it's time to celebrate you. Happy World Bipolar Day. We're so proud of you. And that shows education within my closest circles.
Incredible. You know, organizations, we won't name them, but we've seen them with the rainbow in their avatar or in their banners, purporting to be, you know, allies. What could they do then? Because I've got just a gut feeling says that they're trying to do right, but they're not asking the right questions, and that is, how do we do it right? So let me ask on their behalf then, how do they do it right?
Oh man, what a loaded question. You're right though. You're right. I wonder how many of these organisations have gone in-house. I wonder how many within the company have an LGBTQ plus support group. Not a support group. I don't know what the phrase is. Obviously, my company is just me and my business partner, so every day is a rainbow day for us. But because, for example, I know the NHS, this isn't a bad thing I'm going to say, I just know the NHS have this wonderful system where they offer rainbow lapels, you know, the things you put around your neck. Have I said lanyards. That right? Yeah. Lanyards, thank you. Lapels, I know
what you meant.
Thank you. And that's why we're a team.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
Exactly.
Did I really say that?
So they have this. That's all right. We can edit it out. So they have these lanyards, and you don't just have to. You don't have to wear one at all, but you also don't have to just wear one if you identify as queer. You can wear one if you're showing yourself as an ally, and that is clearly something. A dialogue that they've had internally on what can we do to show that we're allies, and that is just one of the things they do. So I don't know what these other companies are doing, or if it's a quick email on, you know, the end of May going, oh my God, it's Pride Month. Can we get marketing to knock up a rainbow, please? I think what they need to do is create these groups and these safe spaces within the company to then listen to them, to actually ask, and again, hear and listen. I know many people that work in corporate, and a fair few of them have just not come out, not because they haven't lied about it, they've just avoided it at all costs, because the language still used in the corporate world, I'm talking like Canary Wharf and Bank, is so flippant and ignorant. So they don't feel like they can come out. So can you imagine what the environment is like in those companies if they don't feel like they can come out, let alone starting an internal dialogue in order to put a rainbow on something?
Totally hear that. I mean, just on coming out, what was harder for you, coming out as bisexual or coming out as bipolar?
I don't want to say this is one of my favourite questions, but it is. Well, no, that's really bad. It's what I find most interesting, and I'd say coming out as bipolar was far more difficult. I mean, whoever's listening here and identifies as, well, is within the LGBTQ plus community, as well as living with a mental illness, will understand that we are constantly coming out, which is a cliche thing to say, but it's not cliche when it's very true. So again, I just think about on recent events and how I have just been working for 2 months solid with a bunch of new people. And if the topic came up, if something came up, especially being the ambassador of Bipolar UK, you only have to kind of land on my socials and you'll put 2 and 2 together. It's always trickier because you always say it and then you recoil, waiting for some kind of like comment or just that they recoil and go, oh God, because they don't know. Whereas with bisexuality, I've got to a place where I'm so comfortable with it, because despite really being bisexual since the age of 17, 18, but not owning it until I was 24, 25, I've still been out as bi longer than I've been diagnosed with bipolar. So I very much stand on my own 2 feet and have learned how to defend myself when stigma comes along. But bipolar, there's always a risk, and especially when the more and more you sign on to do jobs, especially in our industry, you have to do health declaration. And the one I've just recently done not only wants to know what medication on, not only wants to know about your medical condition, but they want to know when was the last time you went to your doctors and why. Have you ever had to go to a psychiatrist? Are you doing therapy? And I'm like, wow, this is, I feel like I'm being interrogated. So then you write that down and then you send it off to HR or whoever it goes to in the film industry. And then you just got hope that they don't just turn around and go, yeah, this isn't going to work. But what's worse, I'm on one now. What's worse is that if they do read it and then they simply don't acknowledge it, I think, especially in our industry, if you say you're diabetic, then there is a duty of care to make sure you have an EpiPen on set and that the first AD knows about that. But because they don't know how to truly handle mental illness at this stage, they choose to not do their duty of care. And we're still a long way off with that. Whereas I can saunter onto set as a mighty bisexual and deal with the silly questions, which I am happy to deal with now. Oh, Michael? We've lost Michael. Oh no. Does anyone have any questions? Because eradicating stigma has to be a team effort. Where's Michael gone? Well, right. I will continue. I will text him at the same time and make sure he's okay. There we go. I will just say a couple of things. So my parents have been incredible throughout, and I've been very fortunate with both my sexuality and oh, hello.
Hi, April.
Hi, Emily. How you doing?
No, I'm good, thank you. I just thought I'd come and have a chat while we were having an
Please do. Stop me rambling.
No, not at all. What I wanted to say was I just relate to everything that you were talking about. I used to be a teacher, and when I was diagnosed with bipolar, it kind of changed everything for me. I ended up having to leave the profession, and equally, I'd only come out as gay kind of 8 years ago or something as well. So it was quite a big kind of tumultuous time in my life, and I thought, everything that you're talking about I related to so much.
Great. Well, I'm glad there's one person out there. That's all that matters. I always say that if you can make one person feel a little comforted, then that's the best thing you can ask for. So did you have to leave your job, did you say?
Yeah, well, essentially what happened, I mean, it's quite well known within the education community that schools don't necessarily understand mental health as well as we'd like them to. They might do a lot for their children and the students that they teach, but when it comes to the staff, the amount of pressure that staff, I mean, tens and tens of thousands of teachers are leaving the profession every year, with mental health being the first on the list as to reasons why. And it's a tragedy because I was a great teacher. I loved my job. I absolutely loved it. But sadly, the way the system works, the way the system's set up, it doesn't necessarily allow for kind of people to break. You can break your leg and you can get a card written for you and you can be off for a couple of weeks, but when your brain breaks, there's not really any understanding for that. And
did you find that? Oh, sorry, continue.
No, you say.
I was just going to say, did you find that there was a stigma that with, well, I'm going to sound bluntly, it's like, if you're mentally ill, how can you take care of these children?
I'd like to think that wasn't the case, but you never know. I think potentially there might be some underlying opinions. People don't know how to talk about it. People don't know what to say. You know, I've signed hundreds of cards for people over my kind of long career of teaching for being off sick and being off with, you know, a bad back or whatever. And nobody really asked me how I was. And I was, you know, in this suicidal breakdown that just nobody wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
And for me, it was, I just couldn't trust the system. I couldn't trust the system any longer. I wanted to teach, of course I did. That's what I did. That's why I went into doing it. But I couldn't go back in there knowing that potentially it would happen again, because there isn't enough of a system change. So yeah, I mean, the job that I'm working in now kind of is trying to help full leaders kind of see a bit more about that. But you know, there's a long way ahead that people need to really make the effort to understand. And I think when you're talking about the difference between listening and hearing, it applies in I suppose all jobs, but particularly in my case, you know, you can give everyone the information that they might need to read through, but whether they then take that and put that into their daily practice, isn't another thing.
Absolutely. And what's the job you're in now?
I work for an education resource company, so we provide lots of resources to schools, and my particular job is working with school leaders.
Oh, great. So you're still within the education sector?
Yeah, I couldn't leave it. I couldn't leave it.
No, because we need people like you. We absolutely need people like you. And in the school that you were previously at, did they have a support ally group for LGBTQ+?
They did for the students. Yeah, they did for the students, which is good. And the company that I work at, that we have an LGBT+ working group as well. So again, that's great.
That's good.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think it's quite a common thing within businesses, but it's not really talked about again. Yeah.
Well, look, thank you for sharing, because this is what it's all about, and we're going to get on to my personal opinion about eradicating stigma near the end of it. So Michael cannot be heard, which is a plus or a con, depending on what you're thinking. Love you, Michael. But he did ask me, Emily, would you be okay if we use your wonderful voice as this is being recorded? If not, we'll get it cut out.
Yeah, that's fine. That's not a problem.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, thank you. So Michael has asked me, can you let us know of how seriously duty of care is taken on set? How far ahead or behind is the film industry? I have a feeling that the industry likes to think it's far ahead because of the type of people we are, and because mental illness is you can list so many people. At the top of my head, the two which always comes to mind is Virginia Woolf and Robin Williams. Like, our industry is full of creative geniuses, we'll go with that one, and I would say the same. You know, when I'm at my best, I feel unstoppable, and it fuels what I do creatively. In terms of duty of care, I have to do a massive shout out to the film and TV charity. They are incredible, and I've actually been working closely with them on my company's last two projects. These guys haven't had the platform, the exposure they deserve, but they're getting it now. And what they've done is they've created a toolkit for mentally healthy productions. And my company and our two projects were the first ever to implement this toolkit. I think it's no surprise that we have a very unhealthy industry, and I'm not talking about all the obvious things. I'm also talking about long working hours. There were times on this last job where I would be getting up at 5 a.m. and getting into bed at midnight. that is good for no one's mental health, let alone someone living with a mental illness. So them coming in and doing this toolkit, which I hope more and more productions do, is going to be the shift in the industry that we need. And there's, as we know, living in a pandemic, there's been plenty of time and money found to implement all of the COVID precautions that we need to do, all of the testing, all of the briefings, the risk assessments, everything like that. And I think previously, when this charity and people have broached the subject of having mental health briefings, you know, offering this and that, they've always been like, well, we don't have the budget. Oh no, we don't have time for that. I'm calling BS on that because what I'm hoping is that once COVID eventually leaves, I mean, I don't feel like there's a light at the end of the tunnel at the moment, especially for our industry. But once it does leave, if you've managed to find the time, find the money to make that work, then all you have to do is replace COVID with mental health, because you will get the best out of your crew and your cast if you look after them. And film sets can be very cliquey. Film sets are highly stressful, full of pressure. But at the end of the day, as many people say, we're not saving lives, accurate, but we could potentially be changing lives and bringing a lot of comfort to people. So for something that can feel so magical in the outcome, it can be a bit of a curse whilst making it. Oh, all the questions coming over. So, okay, so Michael was asked about my coming out story, both as bisexual and bipolar, how easy or difficult it was. So I mentioned this to Michael. I'm not going to go into my coming out story because it was pretty horrific. Not because of my parents. They were water for ducks back, absolutely. And they said to me, you fall in love with a person, not a gender. And I carry that with me all the time, and I love them dearly for it. But it was an awful experience. And I think despite being pushed out of the closet, I then retreated back in thinking, oh, it's going to be fine. No, it's totally fine. And then came back out 24, 25 officially. And everyone was like, yeah, we know, April. And I was like, what? How did you know? I didn't even know. No, you've known since you were 18, but you just needed to come back out the closet in your own time. I was like, oh, okay, fine. With bipolar, though, having suffered with my mental health from the age of 15, I hit this just, you know, the classic rock bottom and threw my hands up and was like, look, I'll do whatever it takes. And they said, you've got to go to a psychiatrist. And I got popped on the NHS waiting list. I love them with all my heart, but it was an 18-month waiting list. And that's a whole different subject, because my parents said, I don't know if we've got 18 months. We need to get it sorted now. So I ended up going private and booked 2-hour session. I thought, we've got a lot to unpack here, guys. We'll make it work. It's going to be fine. I think we can get it in 2 hours. 45 minutes in. Yeah. So April, you have bipolar type 2. What? 45 minutes? Can I get the other hour back, please? Because it's really expensive. And at the same time, I was quite naughty. I had self-diagnosed myself about a week before. Granted, I'm not one to Google that kind of stuff, but a week before I thought, do you know what? I'll help her out. I'll help her out with her job. And she said, you're bipolar. I was like, no, I'm actually borderline personality disorder. She was like, no, you're bipolar. Ironically, though, about a year later, I did get diagnosed with borderline. So perhaps I was right at the same time, just a little ahead of myself. And then strangely, because once I officially came out as bi, I flew the fat flag so high, because I thought not only was my coming out story just an abomination, I then hid myself, and I vowed to myself I won't do that again, because you've now had about 7 years of hiding and ducking and diving and not really knowing. You're out now, and there may be some stigma, or you may get really nervous telling family members or whatever, but you're out and you be proud. Cue Pride Month. But then when I got diagnosed with bipolar, I told my immediate network, and we spent a year educating ourselves. And then Happiful, I wrote a letter to my 18-year-old self when I was 28, and got it published into Happiful. And that was kind of my way of telling everyone. I didn't mind going around saying, oh, I'm actually bisexual, guys, because I was relieved. I was relieved that I finally got there on my own. Whereas with the mental illness and something that was so, we just didn't know anything about it, I thought, God, I cannot go around to everyone and just go, I've just been diagnosed with bipolar, then have to give them all of the spiel of what it is and what it entails. And for some reason, in my little head, I thought it would be better to write it in a letter, get it published, and then everyone would find it and I wouldn't have to say it over and over again. And it kind of worked. I still get really nervous when I have to put it on a document, and I do still get really nervous of that kind of stuff. But if it's from my mouth in a position where I'm comfortable and the conversation has gone there, I am both comfortable with talking about my sexuality and my condition. Again, partly because I'm now the ambassador of the condition. You kind of got to somewhat be a little bit comfortable in it. And Treacle is a story purely about bisexuality. So, okay, right. What are the tactics of eradicating stigma? So I had an epiphany. I don't know if anyone read the little Diva magazine, Diva article I wrote for them online. But I had this little epiphany and I thought, how do we eradicate stigma? And I'm like, God, we can do as many live streams, or we can write as many articles as we want. How do we eradicate it? And then I think back on what I've just said about me doing the hokey cokey of the closet, and then me deciding to write an article to go public rather than actually talking to people, was because I hadn't eradicated the stigma within myself. I didn't hear myself. I'd listen to myself and, you know, the doctors around me, but I didn't hear. Perhaps there was an element of denial, I don't know. But what I've realized and how far I've come now is that I thought, oh my God, I eradicated the stigma within myself, which then gave me a little louder voice to help eradicate it, you know, to the people around me, or the people who are listening, and the people like you guys here. Because what happens is you draw the same people to you. So after eradicating it from myself, I then speak out, and then I'm in a space like this with you guys, and all I can urge you to do is to take a beat and go, right, what am I still doing to block this? Why am I not sure of what tactics I can do to help eradicate it? It's because you haven't eradicated it within yourself. Now, I don't know if that's obvious or too profound or makes me slightly want to gag, but I'm going with it. And it made me go, oh my God, that is so true. And that is why I still get nervous, especially in work situations, about the bipolar, because I haven't quite got there within my professional career. Well, actually, this is my professional career, but, you know, like that side of my professional career, through fear of judgment. So in addition to can you hear that? Police car. London. Sorry about that. So once you eradicate it within yourself, you then have to ask yourself, right, what is it what's the language I want to hear around me? So a few weeks ago, found out that someone at work was a lesbian, and I was like, oh my God, I'm bisexual. And she was like, you're a lesbian. I was like, no, I'm bisexual. She was like, yeah, same thing. I thought, wow, that is someone within our community. That is someone within our community making those flippant comments. It's potentially worse than someone going, oh, but you've kind of been into girls mainly lately, so does that not make you a lesbian? If a hetero was to say that, which I've also had. And it got to the point where one day, and I said, you please have to stop that. And then she went flippant again. I said, I'm not joking about this. I don't like that language being used. I've told you something. Please have the respect to see me and identify me as that. So then what you got to do is acknowledge the language you want to have used around you. And that's that. And then the next bit is, if you've eradicated the stigma within you, if you know how the language, I keep going on about the language, but you get what I'm saying. If you know what language, for example, I have female friends, female identifying friends that would rather be called gay and not lesbian. So that's their language around them. So they asserted that in a very polite way. It's not aggressive. It's not defensive. They just say, no, I identify as that. Immediately, they should and will respect you. If they don't, get them out of your life. But you see what I mean? Eradicate stigma in you. Be sure of how you want people to. What's the bird? I'm just going to use language again, guys. And then you're on your way to eradicating stigma. And then, other than that, for me, in my line of work, it's making sure I'm producing content which in turn which eradicates stigma, but purely via the means of starting a conversation. Okay, what's the next one? How do introverts and those not as powerful as me articulate their wants around eradicating stigma? Let's not be mistaken, guys. I'm not powerful. And people say that. Do you find this? I think others might find this. Does anyone ever call you brave? I don't like that. I don't know. I keep changing my. Anyway, I go off on a tangent. Introverts. I think it's exactly what I said before, but it's just going to take you a little bit longer. It's going to take you longer to eradicate the stigma in yourself. It's going to take you longer to find the language that you want to be associated with you. And it's going to take you even longer to find the courage to call someone out. And when I say call someone out, I'm not talking, embarrass them or ridicule them in public. It could literally be a text after the event. So if something happens and, they make a comment that says, she's crazy, isn't she? Or in the dinner table and it's like, oh, just ignore it because she's crazy. And if that doesn't sit comfy with you, and it probably wouldn't do with me, just afterwards, just say, hey, not sure if you're aware of this, but you just said this comment and it triggered me a little bit. I know you didn't mean it all, but if you could just avoid saying that would be great. And 9 times out of 10, guys, the other person will feel mortified, and that's not how you want them to feel, but you've asserted yourself. So if you're introverted, don't rush it. It's the same steps as anyone else. It's just going to take a little longer. Okay. Final question. What are the projects you're working on and how can people best follow your journey? So, as I mentioned, the last 2 projects, we've worked closely with the Film and TV charity. And they're both short films. One of them is called Just In Case. and it is myself, and Philip Glenister is playing my dad. What a legend. And it's based on a true relationship of me and my dad, and a lot of it is a true conversation. When I was 18 and very not well, I wouldn't leave the house, so my dad used to take me to service stations, and I asked him, I don't know, a year or so ago, before I started writing this, I said, why did you take me to service stations? And he went, well, it was no one's destination. You know, people were either going somewhere or coming back. No one was going, yeah, we'll go to South Mim service stations today, day out. And he said, he said, I would have eaten my hat if you'd seen anyone there that you know. And no one would really be watching you because they'll be too busy because it's just a pit stop. And I was like, oh, that is profound, Dad. So it is a very simplistic piece dealing with heavy stuff that I've never seen on TV, and it might go down like a sack of spuds. I'm not sure, but if I hadn't have done it, and if I hadn't have put my heart on the line, opening up a dialogue about suicide, really trying to make people understand and see and hear bipolar, then I would have regretted it. So if it brings comfort to one person, then I've done my job. So that's really exciting. And then the other one is called Do This For Me. And it ties in both Treacle and Just In Case. It tackles mental health and sexuality, not in a like bam, bam, double whammy. It's the sexuality is very subtle, and isn't the main focus. And it's a group of girls that come together on one evening, and my character takes each girl into the living room as they pay tribute to their friend who has just passed away. So I won't say much more than that, but really what it's about is hopefully showing an authentic portrayal of girls in their 20s, and how, especially live in London, it can take you 2-3 months to get your girl group together. And despite you maybe have seen one of the members for dinner or the other one for brunch or whatever, actually to get you all together. And then when you do all get together and you're fast approaching 30 and you're all at different stages in your life, your self-publicist comes out and is like, I have to show the best of me. Everything is fine. Don't worry, guys. It's okay. Whereas the more and more these girls drink, the cracks begin to show. And then it all unravels. So that's called Do This For Me. We've got an incredible cast for that. We've got Taj Atwell, Tilly Keeper, and Adele Leonce. They're wonderful women, and I can't wait for that to come out. In terms of my journey, obviously I'm here on Twitter, and you find me on Instagram, @Kelley. I think that's about it, Michael. What, can you talk now? Why don't, as a listener, in your personal one, you try and request the mic? Any questions, guys? Not even a question, anything you want to share? Anything that could bring inspiration or comfort to anyone else here? No? Well, anyone that is there living with bipolar, another thing my dad said, I don't know if anyone else would have heard this, is when I was diagnosed, why I told him over a text message, I will never know, is I texted him, he replied, and before anything else, he said to me, I always knew there was a spark of genius in you. And I've been milking that to death, haven't I? But I thought it was really, again, quite profound for my little Essex dad. Not little, he's 6 foot. But yeah, I thought that was really sweet. And I like to remind everyone there is a spark of genius in them. And also, just across my flat, I saw that on World Bipolar Day, they actually sent me a card. And tell you what, my mum was really smart with this. It's got a rainbow on the front, and it says, "Look at you, living, breathing, surviving all of this." And they sent that to me on World Bipolar Day, and I just thought, wow. And they're just small things like that eradicate the stigma, celebrating the little things, and also not treating you like an invalid is so important. Okay. Can you close and thank people on our behalf? I certainly can, Michael. So thank you guys for tuning in. This has been a little bit of a, well, as a 1-2-1-2 tester of the Twitter Spaces, but I think it's gone really well. Thank you, Emily, for sharing your story, and much appreciate it. Love to you all. I'm not quite sure how you leave this unless it's quite abruptly, but I hope you enjoy your Thursday.